Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. Thank you for being here. My name is Sean. On the other end is Kyle. Kyle, what's going on today?
It is a little cold here in Pennsylvania. Still, I'm waiting for the weather to turn. I'm going a little cabin crazy. I've been doing a lot of cycling indoors and just really want that sun.
Technically, this is the first day of spring, or yesterday was, or like right now is springtime. But we can't tell with your weather.
Exactly. I'll tell you when I see that sun.
All right. Well, hey, we've got another long episode for our listeners today, so we're going to jump right in. First up, we've got our mental health segment, and then, of course, an amazing interview with a new friend of ours in the UK. We'll wrap up with thank you notes. I've got to give our listeners a fair warning. This episode happens to be stuff we've never really talked about in depth. A long time ago, somebody asked us, what topics, in 6 years have you not hit on that you want to hit on or you think might need a little more? And my immediate response was sex.
Right.
So that just got me on our track, and when it comes to disability, it's just different. We've talked dating and we've talked everything else around intimacy, but never really dove into it. And we're going to do that today. However, before we get into that interview, we've got a phenomenal mental health segment. Our dear friend Shelley Bowen joined us. And Shelley wanted to talk about having those hard talks as a mother and somebody in the rare disease space and have to prepare her own family for changes in life and the end of life. She agreed to join us to scratch the surface there. So a trigger warning for our listeners. If you're used to listening to us with your children, this maybe is an episode worth rethinking that. We're going to talk death, taxes, and all things sex. So just fair warning, we're getting into some deep stuff here today, and we wanted you to have a heads up.
Yep, it's good. Good stuff, but tough stuff.
It's all good stuff, but very raw, if you will. So, Kyle, with that in mind, let's get into our segment with our friend, Shelley Bowen. We've had her on in the past. You might recognize her. What sticks out to me from Shelley's stories in the past is the rocking chair iced tea moments on the front porch. So, Shelley, thank you for helping us with this segment of mental health, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We reached out to you because you are a mom and a sister of folks in the disabilities and rare disease space. And you also work in nonprofits for rare disease. So we know that you are just incredibly experienced around all kinds of different scenarios and facets of life. So when we reached out to you, we said, you've got to help us navigate some stuff. And you suggested a couple topics. And one that I would like to get into with you today is something you mentioned about having the difficult talks. Planning ahead to prepare for what reality is going to be. And the biggest one, obviously, is death. There's people joke all the time, right? A couple things in life are guaranteed: taxes and death. We're not going to live forever. So, Shelley, can you help maybe hone me in a little bit on that particular topic, and we'll get right into it?
Sure. Let me begin by saying the best teacher is experience, right? In history. And I didn't do it well, although I thought I had tried to have the difficult talks. But from my experience, what happened is that personally is that my son Michael was needing to go in for an advanced procedure, and we had never talked about advanced directives, right? So we had never talked about, what do you want to do? Who's going to be your person? And it was 2 days before he was having this procedure, and it was at 3:00 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. He couldn't sleep. And it was extremely tearful. He didn't want to sign the papers. And I said, we've got to do this. He said, we've never talked about it. And I'm going in, and have you hidden something from me? Have you, is there greater risk, and how can I trust you? Because we've never talked about this before. And why now? Why now?
Sure.
You told me that this was a routine procedure. These doctors were really good. And now I've got to sign this paper that, what's going to happen if something happens.
Could you, for reference, could you tell us how old was Michael in at this point?
There's too much math, but he was,
all good.
He was, he was older, but he was an adult at this point. What was really interesting was, as we talked through it, was what happens if they have to resuscitate you, what do you want? What life-saving measures do you want? And there was a beat in my heart. Like, I was thinking, we never really talked about what it felt like for him to have Barth. And until that moment, I never talked to him about the depth of suffering, right? And what it was like, and the fatigue he was feeling, and how difficult it was for him, just to be able to keep up pace. He faked it really well. He did really well. So for hearing those for the first time, and then going through these advanced directives and having him sign power of attorney and doing everything he needed to do with healthcare power of attorney, it was really interesting, because he said he named his dad as being his person. And, and to some extent, it was like, what the heck? Why?
Why not me?
Yeah, right. I mean, dude, I'm taking you to the doctors. I wash your clothes. I do all this stuff for you. And he said something really profound. And he said, Mom, you've been fighting to save my life all my life. And I don't know if I can trust you to let go when the time comes.
Oh, wow.
And I am so thankful we had that really hard conversation, because when that time did come, he was not doing well. This was in 2009. He was not doing well. He refused to go on a gurney in the ambulance. He drove his friend to work, even though he wasn't feeling well, because he had given his word. And he said, a person is only as good as their word, and I'm taking him to work. And if I'm not feeling good, I'll go to the hospital. So he came back home and he said, okay, I'm ready. I'll go. I need to go to the hospital. So unfortunately, it was really bad weather. The helicopter couldn't get off the ground. We couldn't get him to the hospital with his cardiologist. And he had a cardiac arrest. And his dad was 4 hours away. I was by myself. My daughter was an hour away. And they started, they initiated CPR, and eventually it got to the point where it was clear that he wasn't coming back. And I was by his bed, and as I saw them compressing his chest, it just was, all these thoughts were going through my head. It was like, oh my, just 30 minutes ago, he was talking to me, and it was interesting. I said, before he lost consciousness, I said, Michael, I said, just don't you leave me. Don't you leave me. And he said, his last words to me was, you're so bossy. You're so bossy. And I said, fine, do it your way. And he took 3 more breaths, and that was when it all crashed.
Wow.
And so inside, after the just shock, which is like a nanosecond, right? I recalled the conversation that we had on our porch. And it was like he was right there and saying, is this for you or is this for me? And I pushed the hands of the healthcare providers off of his chest and said, stop. And it was the hardest thing I had ever done. And in that flip second, the burden that he carried of Barth syndrome was over to me because I never had Barr syndrome. I couldn't carry that for him. And suddenly the burden of grief became mine. So, he had to live with Barr syndrome and I had to live without him. And I'd always hoped to have Barr syndrome out of his life, but never like that.
Yeah.
But that conversation is what has given me sanity and peace, because I knew what he wanted with his life was what I had to do. I had to do it in that moment. I had to let go. And I don't know that I would have had that had we not had that tearful conversation.
Sure. Obviously, I can only imagine those conversations are not easy to bring up, start, or facilitate. But you make a good point. And had you not, it'd be hard to feel any sense of peace in the midst of such tragedy. So how would you encourage listeners? A lot of our listeners are connected either personally or through a loved one to the rare disease community. And, not to be morbid, not everybody is expected to have a short life, right? A lot of us are going to live pretty full lives, some not. Some it's going to be hard, challenging, and it's just different for everybody. With your role at the Barr Syndrome Foundation and in talking with parents or newly diagnosed families, how do you encourage folks to have a conversation that nobody wants to face, but realizing that we probably need to? How do you encourage people to take that step?
Well, I think you opened it by saying we're all going to die. None of us know when it's going to happen. When my first son died, I went to the cardiologist and I said, and Michael was, we didn't know what the future was for him. And I said, if only I had known. And he said, Shelley, if you would have known the exact moment of his death, you would have missed all the stupid moments and not let him go. You would have put him in a bubble and you wouldn't have let him live. And the very things that are going to give you the moments, because the moments the silly moments are where memories are born, right? So you've got to be able to let go in order to let live and have those memories of peace. So I think that you never, Evan was 4, Michael was 23 when he died. But the way I look at it is that Michael needed a heart transplant. He died because there weren't enough organs to go around. You want to talk about little Jimmy, how you feel about organ donation before a horrible accident, before you have that worst day of your life, right? You want to talk to your partner or to the person who is old enough to understand, what do you feel about this? And we're hoping, those conversations need to happen in a lucid moment, not in a crisis. And so if somebody will benefit with Barr syndrome, a lot of our individuals require heart transplant, and, people die while they're waiting because there's such a shortage of organs. So if we want somebody to have that conversation who may be donating the organs to give the gift of life before this happens, we too should live by those same principles. And I think it's not just a matter of being one talk. So we talk more about what mascot our child will follow in college, and there's no certainty that a child will go to college, than we do about what we do if our child dies. And that child's going to die at some point. Maybe they'll die when they're 90. But what if they don't? So you need to have those conversations. So there is a day that is set aside where you can have these difficult conversations. You do want to do it on a time where it's scheduled and it's on your calendar. And there is a day, and I'll have to get the date for you, but it's Healthcare Decisions Day. And it's all about making these decisions and having a conversation with family members. And I think it needs to be important that you don't just have that discussion with the person who has a rare disease, that you have it with the brothers and the sisters and the mother and the father and other family members. Make it a part of your norm to have those discussions so everybody knows.
A quick Google search is showing April 16th as the day designated for those types of conversation.
Death and taxes, man.
Yeah, right? Except and they go hand in hand, even in their designated days. Mm-hmm. Shelley, thank you so much for just sharing a little bit and bearing some of the burden you've faced with your brother, your sons, your dad. I'm thankful that you're in a position of leadership in the rare disease community, and you're helping us, me and Kyle, and so many others, especially in the birth syndrome world, navigate some of the hard things in life. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Shelley.
Well, thank you.
What a great perspective from Shelley, someone who's actually been there. And that's what I love about these mental health segments, is that we're able to learn from people who've been there and who can speak to the subject from a place of experience. It's wonderful. You know, Sean and I know that we're not experts. Many of our guests are not experts, except, you know, Shelley said that experience is the best teacher, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from with this mental health segment. We hope that you're getting a lot out of these conversations. And always remember, you got this.
For our featured conversation today, we were recently joined by Jennie Williams. She is the founder and CEO of Enhance the UK, a user-led charity which helps people with physical and sensory disabilities to live a full life. In fact, something I want to read straight from their website. One of their missions is to normalize disability, and online they write, Enhance the UK is a charity run by disabled people. We are passionate about the society we live in, and I want to change the way disability is viewed for the better. We work with businesses all over the UK and abroad, supporting them in achieving their inclusion goals. Our disability awareness training has been hailed as the best in the country, and we are incredibly proud that this, as well as the other services we provide, helps others to transform their perceptions and view disabled people as active and equal members of society. In our phone call, I picked up on Jennie's passion to improve life. We believe you'll pick up on that too in this conversation, so enjoy meeting Jennie Williams. Jennie has been in our email box or inbox off and on for, probably a couple of months, really, when it's all said and done. So, Jennie, we're so thankful that you carved out time on a Sunday evening in the UK. Thank you for joining. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's hard not to hold back on an innuendo of sitting in your inbox, but I think I did well, so I'm not going to say anything.
As we jump in, can you tell us a little bit about your organization, Enhance the UK?
So we're a disability-led charity, and I have various different disabilities myself. And initially, the idea of the charity started because I've always worked in social care, and I was working in lots of care homes, and certainly in this country, most people in care homes are sleeping in single beds. If you have a disability, particularly a physical disability, very little in care plans about sexual expression, sexual needs, anything to do with that. So I really wanted to highlight that and start talking about that. But particularly 15, well, even more than that now, 16 years ago, nobody wanted to have that conversation with me. It was so taboo. The door just getting shut in my face. So I ended up setting the charity up a little bit like a social enterprise. So running disability awareness training, and from the money that we made from that would feed back into the campaign called Undressing Disability. And actually it's taken off in a way that I could have only dreamt of. And it's just getting bigger and bigger. And actually the more that we've, I can't take credit for all this. I've got a wonderful team that I work with. But the vision I had was, I don't think there's no point empowering lots of disabled people if non-disabled people aren't ready for you and things aren't accessible and people don't understand what access is. And then there's no point trying to train all these people, non-disabled people, in what accessibility is if disabled people aren't talking about it, going out on dates and having the confidence to, do whatever. So actually the two have to run parallel, I think, and they complement each other, and non-disabled people need to hear from disabled people about what they want. It shouldn't be a non-disabled person sat in an office thinking, oh, we need to write a bit of equality training. Let's shoehorn in a bit of disability. Sure. And get them to do a little bit of rubbish training online, which will take 10 minutes so they can skip through. It's not good enough. So hopefully now we're getting to the point where big businesses are realizing that's not good enough and they're starting to improve it massively.
Absolutely. Would you be able to talk to why this is your passion? Like, how did it come about for you?
I think I've always been a person that has been expressive about my sexuality, about my sexual expression and what that means to me. And when I say sexual expression, I mean what makes me feel good about myself. To me, it's like I always like to have my nails done. If my nails aren't right, then one of my headlining disabilities is I'm a hearing aid user and I use my hands. I do sign, I use BSL, but I also use my hands a lot to communicate. So that actually is quite visually important to me. But as I said, I was just really realizing that people around me just weren't having the ability to express that themselves. And that wasn't fair. And it still to this point doesn't feel fair. And it's not, we haven't actually come that far when it comes to care settings. We're still 15 years back. Absolutely. So in this country, there are care homes that have child locks, on their internet, that people can't watch anything, let alone porn. Let's forget that. But even just looking at my charity, for example, that's blocked. It's not acceptable. And so inequality is something that I feel passionate about. So I wanted to set the charity up on two things: having integrity and passion. And anyone that has anything to do with us all have integrity and passion. So it's built, and it's, dare I say, it's grown into a bit of a beast now. But the difference is, Sean, is that 15 years ago, nobody was taking us seriously. And now, we do talks for, consultants. We do talks for, the medical profession. Sure. People are academics are taking us seriously now and go, oh, this isn't just a nice thing. This is actually a fundamental human right that people should have. Sure. And it can really affect people's mental health. Oh, we better take this seriously. So I don't know. Like I said, in some ways, it's massively improved. Other areas, it hasn't. So the whole reason to have a charity, your main goal and aim, if any charity you set up, is to not exist anymore, to not have to exist. And that would be amazing. But we're not there.
Yeah. So just in defining sexual expression, to me, that brings up obviously like sex, but you're saying it's not necessarily, that's not the whole picture, right? It's your hands. It's just the way you express yourself. So can we define sexual expression a little more deeply?
That's a good question. Okay. So I think sexual expression is never going to replace sex. That's not what that is. But sex expression is part of you. So, and it can, so most of us, before we have sex, before we have any kind of intimacy, and when I say sex, I don't just mean penetrative sex. Let's be very clear on that. Whatever sex might mean to you. But most people want to feel good about themselves, feel clean, feel like if shaving's important to you, having a shave, smelling nice, smells so important to me, having your hair done, whatever it is, to feel good about yourself. And that's not necessarily to attract the opposite sex. That might just go out and you think, I feel good today. I feel really good about myself today, and looking in the mirror, and you just have a bit of extra swagger. That's what it's about. It's given you that swagger, it's given you that confidence. And then if you want to then take it forward to meeting someone and that becoming sex, then it can. And sexual expression is a very personal thing, and it's whatever it means to you to make you feel good about wanting to go to the next step, if that's what you want to do.
I appreciate that you guys have set out to normalize everything related to sex, right? Just having the conversations about it helps take away a little bit of that taboo you talk about. So I'm curious, when you set out and formed Enhance the UK and started to go on this mission more full time, what was the immediate response from disabled people? You said, non-disabled they weren't ready, and I believe that, but even disabled people, I'm sure, had to deal with embarrassment or shame, or who knows. Was it an easy ride? Was everybody like, oh my God, let's go? Or was there some pushback?
Again, it's a really good question, because it's a bit of both, and I've always been guided by, listening to what people are telling me. And I've always said, we use this word disabled community, don't we? And people, particularly non-disabled people, go, the disabled community. And I go, what community is that? It's so sick, all of us have such different disabilities. We're not necessarily a community, but you are always putting those questions out. And that's the great thing about social media, checking in all the time, and actually overwhelming response from people saying, we need this. We want this. We want to have our voices heard, but equally we feel shame. We feel embarrassment. We have nowhere to go. And a lot of people had very poor inclusive sex education. So again, not really understanding, nothing's representative. And again, you say sex, people think penis and vagina. That's it. Because that's kind of, what you're taught. And certainly sex education in this country, you're not really allowed to be taught about pleasure, which I can understand. You don't want to be seeming to encouraging, young people to have sex. But equally, you do have to understand that pleasure is an important part of sex. So there's a lot of, disabled people that have never had that experience, never had that information, and couldn't get it from anywhere, because either they're in a care home, as I said, or maybe living with parents, and massively infantilized. And I don't want to particularly talk about sex with my parents, but not many people do. And I'm really, I'm really liberated, and I'm open about things. My dad constantly going, oh, bloody hell, I don't want to know about it, Jen. I'm not interested, which I respect. That's fine. Or somebody who's acquired their injury and their disability, maybe a spinal cord injury or whatever, or got an autoimmune condition, and kind of gone, now I've got to grieve my old body and learn how to be sexually function again, whatever that might mean. So again, there comes a lot of shame with that. There comes a lot of embarrassment. There comes a lot of fear. So it's two parallel responses. Yes, we want this. We really want this, but we are petrified of what this actually means. Yeah. But again, I don't think we definitely wouldn't have been running for this long if we didn't have the responses that we did. And we're constantly working. So that just shows people do want to be talking about this.
I feel like it's similar with anything that's not talked about. Like, yeah, that sounds great, but I have no idea how to even approach the subject, right? Like, I feel like that's probably part of where that response comes from.
People are really nervous about it. And that's a big part of what I was saying. We're working with healthcare professionals because we train. So one of the things we do is we've written training for carers, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, to be able to have this initial conversation. And you don't just meet someone and go, hi, especially if someone's just had an injury. Hi, how are you? Do you like to masturbate? I mean, maybe I do, to be fair, but you don't. You have to build up a trust with someone. And quite often, I was training some nurses a while ago, and they were amazing. They worked in a very famous hospital in this country, spinal cord injury, and I really liked them all. And one of the nurses said, we do have these conversations. We do. And I have that with the patients when I feel it's appropriate. And there lays the problem, when she feels it's appropriate. And I know it was coming from a very good place, right, but a misguided place. So it's about, what we do is train healthcare professionals in how to have this drip feed effect. It's not this one big chat, it's a drip feed effect and building up a trust, and I'm talking from younger people as well. If somebody's going up, especially young people, they're starting to masturbate, they maybe particularly young boys going, their behavior is really difficult, we don't understand, they're doing lots of inappropriate things. But are they doing inappropriate things? Most people that age are starting to discover their bodies. Maybe they haven't got the dexterity to be able to do that. They're very frustrated. There's a reason behind this behavior. So when we talk about sex, it's normally about sexual disinhibition. It's a negative thing. How can we fix this negative problem? Or is it, safeguarding? Very rarely are we talking about it from a very natural, positive point of view. Because if we did that, then there would be less need to safeguard because people would be educated.
Yeah. It's almost the argument, or one of the arguments for legalizing marijuana and, quote unquote, simple drugs and things of that nature. We won't get into that too much, but, it's when the whole world is telling you it's bad, don't touch it, don't think about it, don't bring it up. It just creates more curiosity. And of course, like you said, people start exploring and trying, and before you know it, they feel bad because the whole world is saying it's inappropriate. So that speaks to me a bit, and hopefully it does for some of our listeners too. You talked about Enhance the UK, and you mentioned the trainings and videos that you've created. You even alluded to, or you mentioned Undressing Disability campaign. Can you give our listeners an idea of just how complex your charity is, and what are some of the main, top 5 maybe programs that you offer or that you focus on?
Sure. So let's start from young people. I spoke about sex education. We work with lots of sex educators, looking how to start making sex education more inclusive. And in the UK, most sex educators are female. They are around 25 years old, and they're non-disabled. That's got to change. Even someone teaching you sex education is not inclusive. So we look with sex educators how to start making that inclusive, even to the visuals, and again looking at making information accessible in British Sign Language. Then working your way up to people getting older. We run training, as I said, and that could be working in schools, that could be working with healthcare professionals, that could be working in care agencies. And then we run something called the Love Lounge, which is probably one of the most popular things that we have. And it's essentially an agony on setup where people write in with their problems, and we started it off initially years ago calling ourselves a non-expert sexperts, and catchy, I know, and then as the years have gone on, actually we have now been able to bring in experts, and we have qualified counsellors and occupational therapists, etc., working on there. And then we now do 1 hour free Love Lounge surgeries, which is open to all your listeners as well. It's completely free, and you book on a session, and it's not a counselling session, but we are the first port of call to try and direct you and try and find other outside help. And sometimes we can actually find solutions on that call. It might be around finding some inclusive sex toy or furniture or lube, or just being able to have that conversation. And actually, that's all somebody needs, is to be seen and heard. Sure. So that's really important. We run something called the Hub. Again, it's the only thing like it in the world, and we call it the sexy little sibling to LinkedIn. We've got all these catchy, really naff titles. I can take credit for all the naffness. I just don't take credit for the work that goes in behind it. But basically, you go in, you fill out your profile, bit like LinkedIn, and you just chat to other people. You can share all resources on there for free. If you've got any events on there, it goes free. We have a newsletter that goes out, any podcasts, that will go on there. So it's about really bringing the community, in inverted commas, together of people who want to talk about sex and disability. And it's going really well. And it just shows that it's needed. Sure. So that's something that we offer. And then we're bringing out our own inclusive sex toy range. Hopefully they'll be launched in May, and I'm really bloody excited about it. We've been working on it for so long, so long. And the reason it's taken so long, one, because there's been COVID and Brexit. I don't know if you guys know much about Brexit. God, it's horrible. But anyway, so it's caused a lot of bumps in the road. But we've worked so hard having focus groups of different disabled people with different impairments and looking at how we can make sex toys inclusive. And I mean opening the package. How do you open the package if you've got poor dexterity and you can only use your teeth? How do you hold the sex toy? How do you charge it up? How do you place it? So actually, before all of those toys came out, I wanted to write the training so we could train, again, carers, healthcare professionals. So when these toys did start coming into fruition and going out, people weren't horrified going, but legally, where do we stand? Yeah. Well, we're teaching you legally, actually, people have a right to be supported. And in this country, you can't insert the toy into someone or put it around someone. You can't be in the same room when they're using it, and you have to leave. But other than that, it's perfectly legal to support somebody. So people need to understand the law before they blankly say no and don't support someone. So we're excited about the toys, and the range will just grow, hopefully. It's called Quest, and the information will be on our website very soon in the next few weeks. And we want to listen to people. If someone comes to us with a great idea and say, actually, this would really help, we want to listen and create that into a toy. So looking at dilators and things like that next. So so that's a brief synopsis of the kind of things that we do.
I gotta say, I was impressed with your myriad of resources, right? You've got an incredible website, and for our listeners' sake, we'll link it in our show notes, but enhancetheuk.org. Lots of videos. You guys are producing a podcast. I listened to an episode of that. You've got lots of different downloads and material to look at. Like you said, the Love Lounge. There's so much going on, and I'm quite impressed with how far-reaching your mission is, and of course the vision you started with.
Yes, but it's taken over the years to be seen and heard and respected and taken seriously. And also it's really important, anything that we put out, we want it to be accessible. And the podcast, we've got a third series of our own podcast coming out. So we would love you guys to be guests on our podcast, and we can flip this around and do it the other way around.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I feel most comfortable just asking the question.
No way. This is now you said that, I'm definitely going to make sure that happens.
Thanks a lot,
and I'm not monologuing at you, just completely. But I love the podcast, probably like you guys, because you hear from other people, don't you? When you find out what's going on, and the resources. Again, certain disabilities, what people get scared about is that sex can't be spontaneous, for example. And it can't be. If you need a hoist, if you need a carer, if you need, if you've got, incontinence or whatever. And actually, the bondage world and the DBSM, have I said that right? And my brain is saying... Thank you. When you say something, you go, that doesn't sound right. Yeah. It's a Sunday in the evening. I've got 2 young kids. That's my excuse. So BDSM and actually it's a very comparable world because it's quite organized with BDSM. It's regimented. You have safe words. You have to plan things. And actually, one of our occupational therapists, wrote this beautiful blog about it's similar thing. Just because it's non-spontaneous, it doesn't mean it can't be sexy. It doesn't mean it can't be amazing. And actually, most people who are married with kids, they don't have spontaneous sex. They go, right, in the diary, Tuesday night, it's our night, that goes out the window. So it's about, with the free resources, really trying to support people to come to terms with whatever they need to come to terms with. And I'll just say this is really, and I really believe this, I'm not just saying it, most of the people that I've worked with over the years genuinely have a more fruitful, amazing sex life than non-disabled people. And the reason for that is because you have to communicate. You have to say when something hurts. You have to say if, certain positions you want to be in. You have to have that conversation. And therefore you talk about things. Whereas a lot of non-disabled people, especially, heterosexual couples, it's just quite basic a lot of the time. So actually, I see the really beautiful positive side of it as well. And somebody who has I have a condition which causes me to have very painful sex. I can say that's been a grieving process for me as well, from a very personal point of view. So I always like to be able to talk to people and say, I haven't just got empathy for it. I do get it to a certain extent.
Sure.
Yeah, and like we always say on the podcast, just talking about these things is huge, and I think that's the thing that creates the stigma, especially around sex and disability, right? So it's just completely liberating, as tough as it is, I wasn't sure going into this conversation how comfortable I would be, and I'm certainly not, but maybe the next conversation will be a little more comfortable, and reduce some of that stigma even in my own mind.
Do you think it makes you feel uncomfortable just because you don't really talk about sex in general?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not even sure that. Wow, now we're going real personal here. I'm not even sure that it's specifically because of disability. I think it's probably bigger than that, just society's view of sex in general and just how we all think about it. Then you add the disability complication on top of that, right? And that makes it even more complicated.
Yeah, and I absolutely. And I think culturally, certain places you're from, or certain countries you're from, it's really difficult. And you have to take that into account. And I think because I work in a world where we just talk about it all the time, I forget sometimes that people aren't that comfortable. So I just go diving in, like with the innuendo comment right at the beginning. I'm like, no, we're not there yet. But I dived in anyway. So, but I mean, that's a really big deal. The fact that you're saying you're not uncomfortable with it, even having me on and having these conversations, I appreciate that, because I appreciate that we have to start carving the way, to having these conversations.
I guess adding to that, for me, Jennie, you asked Kyle, why do you think uncomfortable? Is it because you don't talk about it? And that stuck out to me because I think I'm only uncomfortable around certain people. I have a whole, side of life that where it's common language, or maybe it's talked about, and I have no issue talking about what I want, or what I like, what I don't like, and having conversations that evolve around all things related to that 3-letter word. But then,
the sex word.
That one. But I don't want to have that conversation with a few people I work with. I don't want to have that conversation with my mom. I don't want to have that conversation with certain people. So I do think there's quite a bit of it. We just don't talk about it.
Exactly.
But we as a society.
And that's okay. And I think that's why we are here. That's why we exist. Because, like I said, I don't want to talk about it with my mum either, and I have a really good relationship with my mum, but I don't want to be, talking about this. And so if you don't have people around you to be able to have those chats, I mean, women generally, we speak about sex so much more freely and openly, and we sit around and chat. Lads are just not as good at chatting about it. People think it's the other way around, but it isn't. And so that's why we exist, and that's why the Love Lounge surgeries exist, etc. So you can have these conversations with people that are totally non-judgmental. You can never see again in your life if you don't want to. You can say whatever you like and know it's a safe space and not be judged, unless it's, it has to be all legal, obviously, but within the boundaries, but you won't be judged. And that's why we set up, because you shouldn't, just because you've got a disability, shouldn't then be having these conversations with your parents when you're a grown-up, because you wouldn't be doing that. You know, it might just happen to be you still having to live with your parents when you're a bit older because of access issues, you know, but it doesn't mean it's a natural conversation to have. Of course it's not. And again, sleeping in a single bed, most grown-ups sleep in double beds. Psychologically, that can really mess you up if you go from double bed to single bed, you know, and things like that can be quite basic but be huge, that we should be able to talk about. It's not just sex.
I think there's a benefit to drawing that line, you know, because I think a lot of times it's a little bit ambiguous. And so we stay away from it. Like, all right, I don't talk about that with my mom, but I talk about it with this person. Well, okay, where exactly is that line? And in this case, you know, if you have trained counselors, we can form that line, that we can draw that line, and then, you know, feel free to talk about it in a safe space.
Yeah. And can I just give you an example? I mean, you know, somebody last week contacted us, and a youngish guy, I say that because I'm 44, so anyone's young, like, you know, 24. Oh, you're so young. But he's at uni, and he's 24. He's doing an advanced maths degree. He's got cerebral palsy and quite a severe speech impairment. And he came onto one of our love lounges, and he's like, I just don't think I'm ever going to meet anyone. Everybody treats me like I've got a learning disability. I've got no friends. I'm struggling. I've just got to accept I'm never going to meet anybody. And I was able to reach out to one of the guys that work with us called Ted, who has also got cerebral palsy, who's also got a speech impairment, who's also similar kind of work that this guy does. And I said, can you meet up with you? Can you reach out? Can you make contact? You're happily getting married now in a relationship. And he's like, that was how I used to feel when I was 23. So sometimes it's not always about having professionals talk to you. It's about having somebody who gets your life and you can look up to a little bit and go, oh my God, I'm being seen and heard and understood. And actually I can see that there's a way forward for me. So we do try and really think carefully about who we put people in touch with. It's not always about being a trained professional for that particular session. So, and we always say, sometimes if you write in, it might take us a couple of weeks for us to respond. That's not because we're ignoring you. We spend a really long time researching of where to signpost you.
There's so much power in just talking to somebody who's had a similar, if not the same experience as you, and they're on the other side of it.
100%. Game changer for some people.
Jennie, most of our listeners live in the United States. What's your reach beyond the UK? Can somebody like me access your materials and your resources? Are there any limitations?
No, absolutely. Apart from face-to-face training, although I love going out. Actually, when I used to live in Minneapolis for a while, and I actually sat on a sofa with my now ex-boyfriend, but he's a lovely friend of mine, and I sat, and Enhanced UK was born on a sofa in Minneapolis. So Minnesota. So absolutely, the reach is wide. Anyone can access it. You know, if you're okay with the time difference, that's the only thing. Join the hub, all resources, everything's free. You can come and join. We do run training online on Zoom if anyone was interested in that. We do charge for training because, as I said, that money goes back into allowing all the other services for free. So we can absolutely run training. It's just the face-to-face stuff. That's the only thing that's not accessible. You know, you can't access.
Yeah. Everything you're doing, to me, just sounds and feels beautiful. I love that you're pioneering a bit in this space, and like you said in the beginning, you're not ashamed and you're totally fine and liberated in helping both sides of the coin, able-bodied, disabled persons figure it out and find a bit of, I don't know, freedom, if you will, in how they express themselves and how they talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, one of the last things I'll say is, like, we call non-disabled people the not yet disabled, and we kind of joke and go, you're coming over to the dark side, you know. But I think the reality is, you know, like certainly the stats in the UK are 83% of disabled people were not born disabled. That's a huge amount, and people who don't understand that 80% of disabled people in this country have hidden disabilities. So we're not saying that everyone's going to become disabled and something terrible is going to happen, but hopefully it's because you live to a ripe old age and your bodies start changing and things start going. And, it might be that you have incontinence or, have problems having an erection, or your joints don't work in the same way and grip is difficult, whatever it is. But even if you don't care about disabled people, be selfish and think about your future self, and think about everything that you do, making it naturally inclusive. And texting was initially set up for deaf people. Now everybody texts. So it's about just changing that mindset a little bit about how you feel and how, and not kind of, if you happen to be on Tinder or Hinge or whatever it is, and you see a disabled person and they're showing their disability, not just instantly swiping and just think no. If you think, actually, I quite fancy them, I quite like the look of their face. No, just being a little bit more open-minded, because you could end up having the best sex of your life, frankly, and the best relationship. So, it's just about being a little bit more open-minded.
That is incredibly encouraging, and I'm so glad that you carved out time to join us on the show. I can't think of a better way to end, aside from all those encouraging and really truthful sentiments, right? You never know. You never know.
Does this mean I get a two disabled dudes cap? I feel a bit left out. You two are wearing your caps, and I'm just,
I think we can work that out.
We can certainly look into it.
I've made it. This is it. I'm gonna retire now.
We will contact our shipping department, see if we can work it out.
Thanks so much.
Shipping.
I'll swap it. I'll swap it for a sex toy. There we go.
Oh, there it is. Yes. Jennie, thank you so very much for coming on the show today and telling our listeners a little bit about you and the vision and mission behind Enhance the UK, and helping Kyle and I get over a little bit of discomfort. I think this has been wildly, enhancing for us individually and for the podcast as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sean, as you heard in that conversation, that made me really uncomfortable. But I'm so glad that we had the conversation and that Jennie was so willing and able to do it. And it's just going to make it that much easier for me next time we have a conversation, or I have one in my personal life.
I'm not going to lie. I'm willing to bet she got a kick out of making it a little awkward for you and I. But I'm with you. I agree. What a phenomenal, experienced individual to come navigate that topic and help us dive deeper than we've ever been before. So, right. Jennie, thank you. With that, Kyle, let's wrap it up like we do always. We believe in gratitude, and expressing gratitude helps us stay grounded. So, Kyle, who is your thank you note going out to today?
I've talked a lot about the community here at my condo complex, Old Forge Crossing in Pennsylvania. And the social committee invited me to give my story one night.
Nice.
And yeah, it was really nice, really flattered, and it was fun. Everybody was very focused and complimentary and, tuned in. During the Q&A, I said my goal for this year was to ride to work every day 1 week. And I told them that one of the big challenges is food, just having food to eat every night. Because, you get home at 7:30 and, you just rode 15 miles. You're not feeling like going out to the store. So anyway,
sure.
Everybody was like, oh, what? You food? What are you talking about? We'll totally do that.
Nice.
So last Sunday, my friend Joan, who I've mentioned before, she called me up and she's like, hey, are you home? And she brought over a quiche. Just a whole quiche that I ate for a couple days, right? So anyway, that's just the beginning. So I really appreciate all the support I get here at Old Forge Crossing.
Like a legit family right there. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. My thank you is going out to StorQuest, and it's a bit of a backwards thank you. StorQuest is a personal storage company, and I do believe they're nationwide. They're big. They're at least all over California. I'm saying thank you to them for helping me make an easy decision to never do business with them again.
Oh my gosh!
And I will be happy to. No, I am not kidding. And I will be happy to share stories with you on a future episode, Kyle.
Okay, so how does that fit into this segment, though? We're supposed to talk about
thankful.
gratitude.
Yeah, I'm grateful that they have helped make it easy. It's not a hard decision.
Okay.
It's going to save me money and energy because that's just how difficult they have been to work with over the last several weeks. So.
All right. Well, looking forward to those detailed stories.
I'm sure you are. Again, I want to say thank you for real to Shelley and Jennie for being a part of our show today and helping make this episode a reality. We encourage you to visit our show notes at twodisableddudes.com for links to things in today's episode. If you're enjoying this show, please be sure to subscribe. If you haven't yet, there's probably a button on your player somewhere right now. Go ahead and tap subscribe. Be sure to share the show with a friend. We appreciate it when you do that. We look forward to talking with you again next week. Until then, keep living with urgency.
Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.